Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast about how we make meaning of our lives and experience the miracle of living. In this episode, managing versus suppressing ourself with Stoicism. So Stoicism has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, making a comeback from the old school Stoicism, which is commonly criticized for promoting emotional suppression and fostering passivity in the face of injustice and being psychologically unrealistic. Well, modern day focus has upheld the Stoic traits that focus on cultivating inner peace and resilience through virtue, rationality, and acceptance of what can't be controlled. Psychology models more and more these days are calling to the need for personal agency. And Stoicism is a leading model for taking responsibility for our perceptions and our values and our held beliefs in life. I appreciate seeing new personalities and perspectives come to the forefront of what I feel are worthwhile initiatives. And in Stoicism, Tanner Campbell has brought a fresh take to the concept. Tanner's an American philosopher of Stoicism whose goal is to clear up contemporary miscommunications about Stoicism with a focus to uphold what virtue really is against the traditional interpretation of Stoicism, challenging the, as he says, the watered down Silicon Valley take on Stoicism. Well, a few years ago, Tanner launched a podcast called Practical Stoicism, and it kind of went viral, quickly eclipsed 500,000 downloads per month, which is to say the show did in a matter of months what many of us podcasters took years to attain. So wherever you're listening to this, you can find Practical Stoicism. And Tanner also has a book out since we did this conversation together. The book's titled, What is Stoicism? A Brief and Accessible Overview. So coming up next, my conversation with Tanner Campbell and a look at how to utilize Stoicism for benefit in your life. Let's see how we can make better meaning of our lives today.
Tanner, we got pretty, at the beginning of part one, talking together, we got into some of the spiritual aspects of Stoicism and talked about that and Christianity throughout all that. But I know that's been a part of your journey. Matter of fact, I heard that on the show that you were just interviewed on, and that you came from I'm going to say, it seems like a fairly staunch atheist perspective, and then maybe aren't in the same camp now, but I'll ask you, where are your values? Where are you spiritually?
Sure. I'm still at a point where, so the Stoic God, which we talked about a little bit before, is essentially the universe. The universe is the God, and because organisms need to be well structured in order to continue to be sustained, there's an idea in Stoicism that the universe, being part of the animal that we call the universe, is structured in a logical and potentially caring way. Now, because you don't pray to this God, because you don't donate money to this God, because there's no politicization of different sects of this God, right? I don't feel like believing in the quote unquote Stoic God is at odds with me being an atheist, which might sound odd because God is in the word Stoic God, right? But I still feel like one can be an atheist, and at least in contemporary terms, and believe in the Stoic God. I might change, soon enough, but that's where I'm at for now.
Well, I'll pick into it because as we look at spirituality, I mean, I have so many people on the show, and psychiatrists and scientists and professors, and at the core, it's again the category spiritual, not religious. And when we talk about spiritual, and as I look at how you have helped me understand and define Stoicism, there's almost an aspect. Matter of fact, I thought about this when we talked the first time of AA. They stay within AA and the power and structure and ethos of AA. They recognize a higher power. And to me, I come to that first with spirituality before we get into the religious aspect or a specific God or a deity or whatever, is just the acknowledgement of something greater going on beyond ourselves. And it feels like that is an essence of Stoicism, that there is a greater purpose beyond me. Is that fair?
Yes, there's a greater purpose beyond the self, but the Stoics are, and I am, they're corporealists, which means if something exists, it's a body, it's a physical body. And if something doesn't not exist, I think is the way that they phrase it. And this is getting heavy into the cosmology and physics of Stoicism, which I'm not prepared to do on this podcast.
You probably lose me too, but that's okay. It's still, it's relevant.
Yeah. Well, probably and honestly, because I don't understand it well enough at this point to be able to speak on it authoritatively. And so I won't, but there is no higher power plane of existence in Stoicism. It doesn't exist. Everything is a body, a physical body within the universe. But if you're asking me in general, if I think there's a greater purpose, absolutely. I think that, and we didn't talk about this actually in that segment, but the Stoics have something called the circles of concern. And I want to say that the person who initiated this was Heracles, I think, and I've probably got that wrong, but the Stoic circles of concern are concentric circles. And at the center, it starts with the self. And then outward from there, you have family, then you have friends, then you have community. And then Kai Whiting and Leonidas Konstantakos added another circle in, I want to say 2018 or maybe earlier than that, for animals and non-human animals and the biosphere, so to speak, the environment. And the idea of the Stoic circles of concern is that you are always efforting to bring the next concentric circle into your circle. So you can't make your family yourself, but you can make your friends more like your family, and you can make your community more like your friends, and you can make the environment more like your community. And you're trying to pull these concentric circles into one circle, which is of course probably not possible in totality, right? But it's something you're always trying to do. And I think that in that way, the Stoics view the greater good as, let's say, doing that as well as you can. So we're always trying to think of others in the same way and with the same care that we think of ourselves.
Well, yeah. So greater power, that's interesting if we come to greater purpose, because it does feel like the Stoic way, Stoicism, is back to the roles that you talked about. I really appreciate that. It's got me thinking about that, on recognizing and accepting the roles that we choose, that we come into, that we accept, and being responsible to those is, again, to me, a core spirituality is it's not just me. Life is not just about taking care of my own, but even virtue. It's what's virtuous to the greater good. And if as you said, of the body, it's the body next to me, the body in my community, like that. And I appreciate that. Family, friends, community, non-human animals, and the environment that I get that from even just a cursory reading of, Marcus Aurelius. There is a great responsibility, I'd say even reverence for humanity.
Yes, and for nature as well. It's unfortunately common that the deeper someone dives into Stoicism, the more it can seem, if people kind of recoil at terms like global warming and human responsibility to that, they might find Stoicism to be a bit contentious for them, because the Stoics would ask us to look at how we treat our immediate environment or the broader environment as a whole, and ask what that treatment says of our character. It's one of the things that's been really helpful for me, not relative to the environment specifically, but in Stoicism, always asking myself, and this is maybe this is my mantra, right? We could say that.
All right.
Asking myself, what does this action, what does this thought say of my character? And Kai Whiting and I have had a conversation a couple of times about, we paint this example of, well, let's say you're aware that fossil fuel burning cars are just generally not good for the immediate environment. Like they might not be good for the lake next to your house or something like that. We don't have to think globally. We can think locally. Is it appropriate for you to do something like put solar panels on your house or get an electric car? Is that the appropriate thing to do? Well, maybe, but also maybe not, because let's say you live in a really rural area and you have to drive, 100 miles to work, and And if you install all of the necessary electric things, well, you're just drawing from the electric power plant next to you anyway, which is burning fossil fuels. So is it any better, or are you just making yourself feel better? So just, I constantly am asking myself, is the thing I'm doing, is the thing I'm thinking, is the way I'm acting reflective of someone with a good character? And the way I answer that question is I have to break down, kind of the way I did in that silly little example. I have to break down as to what is the most appropriate thing to do given my roles, given my geography, given my situation, given my responsibilities. And I think that's, I mean, we started this conversation by talking about maybe before we actually hit record, what my beliefs were and what my values were. And I think that right there is at the center of all my beliefs and values, is, and shouldn't be surprising to you at this point because virtue is the only good, right? We've talked about that. That my first question to myself is, what does this say of my character, and is this something a virtuous person would do?
Yeah, that's what I just wrote down. Is the aspect of, if I am asking you to define your spirituality, in essence, it is virtuousness, which is. It feels when we read the definitions of those, and it goes into morality, that is defined, isn't it, as unto the community, the greater good, in essence.
Well, so
it's just us. It's hard to define or to even have a morality.
Yeah. So it is kind of it's an odd two-way street. Both sides seem to be a reflection of each other, but you are ultimately focused on developing virtue. But in developing virtue, you necessarily have all of the things you must interface with. And they are, you can think of, how to treat your spouse, how to treat your children, how to deal with stress, how to handle your job. You can think of those all as nexuses at which my desire personally to develop a virtuous character is able to be exercised. So it requires, so virtue it is somewhat me-centric, but that doesn't matter, because in order for me to achieve it, I have to be in service to the cosmopolis. I have to be in service to my brother or sister or family or friends, etc.
Well, and again, I like those circles, as you talked about, that we're trying to pull more and more or get closer to each of those outside of just ourselves. Well, in that's interesting, because you said, it's self and then family, friends, community, animals. So the next category is relationships. And so I would ask that same question, that as you look at your own values relationally and what you are striving for in your relationships, how would you define that?
I am actually very careful about this as of late, because I do think that one of my most central roles is as a Stoicism communicator, and that is the role that I fulfill as a podcaster on practical Stoicism, and as a writer and as a speaker. That is one of my most central roles. And so having too many friends is, that's a very, that can put me at odds with what I view to be my more central role. So let's say when I look to form personal relationships, what I put at the forefront of that decision is, who can I walk alongside in a helpful and meaningful way? And if I can't do that, and if that person is perhaps not interested in that, then perhaps that is not the relationship I should be trying to prioritize to become, that's not the relationship I should be trying to form, because it's not actually going to be helpful to that other person. I think we live in a world where, everybody's got a million Facebook friends. I think I might be the only person I know who's only got like 25 Facebook friends, but the circles of concern are not, and Kai Whiting says this, it's not an invitation to have a million friends. It's an invitation to have friends that you can actually be beneficial and helpful with, and who can actually help you grow and self-reflect. Seneca says something in, I want to say letter 39 or 49. He talks to Lucilius, who he's writing this letter to. These are the moral epistulas of Seneca. Seneca's letters is what it's usually known as, or what it's broadly known as. And he says, listen, fella, you can't be by yourself because you're not virtuous yet. And when you're by yourself, you're just going to marinate in your own nonsense because you don't know any better. So you should seek out a crowd, but you also have to be careful in the crowd, because while you're at less of a risk of marinating in your own wrong assumptions or poor impressions and assenting, right? While you're at less of a risk of doing that, now you're at risk of groupthink and not thinking for yourself and just going along with what's popular because you're part of the crowd. And so what he does is he kind of rides the middle. If you're not a sage yet, if you're just a Prakaptan, and you definitely want to avoid the crowd, but you can't be alone, then what you need to put somebody in your life who you're embarrassed or ashamed to act poorly around. He says something like, if you put someone in your life who even the most reckless person, I think he says the most wretched person would check their shortcomings around if they were in front of them. Have friends like that, or have people like that in your mind. So I think in that instance, he's actually talking about Cato, who I think is dead at that. I'm pretty sure is dead at that point. He says, it doesn't have to be a real person, but you can appoint someone as guard over your thoughts. Someone like Cato, who Seneca, for what it's worth, actually thought was a sage, was a Stoic sage. Whether or not that's the case is up for debate, but that is what Seneca thought of him. And so the idea is that we want to have friends whom we can be a benefit to, whom can be a benefit to us, not in this selfish give and take, tit for tat kind of way, but in a, friendship in Stoicism means something very specific. These friends that we have online, while it's not true that we have no feeling for them or we have no concern for them, that's not really friendship. Friendship has a lot of responsibilities with it, whether you are the person being friended or the person doing the friending. And I think I take that very seriously in forming personal relationships these days because I guess I know better now than I knew when I was 25 or something.
I appreciate you saying that. I find myself checking my vernacular a lot when I start to talk and reference somebody and say, oh yeah, so I've got this friend, and you know what? They're an acquaintance. We met once. It was good, but a friend.
Which is not to say anything negative about the relationship, right? That's okay. But it's all, remember we talked about Stoicism having very specific language and having a very high specificity to the words that are used. Well, friend is one of those highly specific words, means something.
Yeah.
It doesn't just mean someone who, likes your Instagram account.
It feels like we need to give another term and give it more gravity because you've got 5,000 friends on Facebook is what it's literally called. And yet I don't know most of them. So it's almost kind of like differentiating, love. Oh, I love my spouse and oh dude, I love chocolate. Is it the same love? So I appreciate that. You talking about marinating in your own stuff. I'll never forget one of my kids. They saw the latest Matrix, I think it's the fourth one, right? They said, yeah, it was pretty good, but they kind of got lost in their own sauce. That's what you just got me thinking of, with marinated in my own sauce, which by the way, it talked about in part 1, having a movie club as part of your, so that's at stoicpod.com/discord. And you've got a
stoicismpod.com.
Stoicism pod. Yeah. Thank you, Shaka. I thought it was nailing it. Stoicismpod. .com/discord, and in that community, a movie club. Man, when you guys do that with Lord of the Rings or the Matrix or something, I'm in. I don't know Harry Potter so well. You get into those guys.
I think our next one is going to be from one of my favorite movies I want to say it was the very late 90s or very early 2000s. It's called Grosse Pointe Blank, and it was just such a good movie. So I'm going to see if Stoicism ruins that movie for me.
I know the name, but I don't know that I know this. I'll pull it up. Okay.
So it's got Joan Cusack, and it actually has his other sister, whose name I'm failing to remember now. But it's a great movie. A guy leaves his girlfriend at prom night and goes off and becomes an assassin for the CIA. He's like a spook, is what they're called. And he comes back for his high school reunion, and it's kind of like a re-meeting the girl while having to avoid assassins who are trying to kill him, and then he has to do a job while he's there. It's a dark comedy, but it's a really good one. It's one of my more favorite films. But we were talking about circles of concern.
Yeah.
And in fact, the movie club and the Discord are a way of me doing that. If you imagine me as the center, and then movie club, and then the general Discord, and then the podcast, these are all attempts of trying to get people closer to me, to do more for them, and accepting them, where they want to stop. Some people just want to listen to the podcast, and that's the end of it. And that's okay if that's as far as they want to go. And some people want to come to the Discord and talk a little bit. Well, that's a jet. I'm sorry.
Was it? I heard that. I heard that. We'll let it roll like you did. I listened to your last show and you had it was an alarm that went off. And I thought, really, he's just going to leave that in. And you said, yeah, folks, this is live TV. And you just ran.
Well, I actually thought it was a funny way of introducing the ads in the break.
I noticed that it came right at perfect time. Maybe we're right at 17 minutes. We may be dead on. We'll see. Well, hey, health and wellness is the next one here. And if I heard correctly, and I must have been in that show, are you vegan?
I am. See, this is hard because people so much want to put labels on things. So what I think of myself as is an ethical eater. So I'm not a vegan. I'm something that's closer to a vegetarian, but my my neighbor recently told me I was a flexitarian, which irritated me just because I was like, oh, there's a label for that.
That's what we use. My wife said that's what we are now. We went from vegan to vegetarian and now we're flexitarian. So I got that one too. So welcome to the club.
Well, essentially, so one of the problems with philosophy in general is that, and it's not a problem, it's actually great, but the deeper you get into it, and this is probably true of also spiritual faith or a religion as well, the further you get into it, the more you realize you think you're doing it, but you're not really doing it. And so something that I realized early on in my deeper studies of Stoicism was that part about what is appropriate and what is moral given what you know. So I looked at my consumption of meat products and I thought, I don't have a problem with the fact that an animal dies. Everyone dies. It's an indifferent to me as to when I die or when a cow dies. But what is not an indifferent to me is whether or not I'm allowed to live according to my nature and whether or not a cow is allowed to live according to their nature. And I think that anyone who's ever seen, Meet Your Meat or one of those terrible documentaries where you've just got these animals that are packed shoulder to shoulder. They feed cows hormones to be constantly pregnant all the time. And that's just like, that doesn't feel like allowing a living thing to live according to its nature. And Stoics are really big on that. And so I was confronted with, look, I say I'm practicing Stoicism here, but I'm kind of sweeping this under the rug as if it doesn't exist and it's not problematic. So I started I did like a few months of being straight vegetarian, just as a way of kind of breaking habits. And then I returned from that and said, look, there's a responsible way for me to consume these things because like I said, it's not a problem to me that cows die or are used as food. I'm okay with that. So long as they're allowed to live according to their nature, whatever a cow's nature is. And I think that that's something like, grazing free and not being locked to a thing and kept constantly pregnant and being kept from their calves and stuff like that. I think that that's very nice. And if I can find a source for those sorts of things, then I'm okay with that. So I'm not a vegetarian. I don't eat meat if I don't know where it comes from kind of person for those reasons. And I think both of us have a sponsor, ButcherBox.
Yeah, I heard your ad.
Yeah, they do that. And they also, as it happens, have vegan patties and burgers, which I also use. So when you can find a source for things like that as a Stoic that you're comfortable with and that you can ethically reason yourself through, then I don't have a problem eating meat. I just have a problem with you used a great term actually in your ad read that I might have to borrow, but it was consumerized or commercialized meat. I can't remember what you said, but I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's this whole mechanism of meat production at all costs. And that just doesn't feel good.
Agreed. Well, I jumped into that and, I'll back up on health and wellness to ask you the overall values. So again, I just listened to your most recent episode where you were interviewed by one of your listeners and you mentioned just going along the journey of your life and through some of those tumultuous times of being like, oh my gosh, I got really overweight. And, so it looked like that was so I'll come in that angle and say, so where do you, when you look at your own health and wellness and your pursuit of Stoicism and life, where are your values for where you want your health and wellness to be?
Oh, that's great. So this is something we've actually recently talked about on the Discord and on an upcoming fireside chat that I'm having with Kai. So there are two things that are true. Your physical health is an indifferent to your ability to build virtue, right? You can be fat and weak and all those things, and you can still be a virtuous person. However, like I said, that mirror aspect, and I'm still working through this. I just started kettlebell training a few weeks ago, and I'm really trying. But the other part of that is if I don't care about my physical health if I don't care about my fitness, if I don't care about my mental health, what does that say about my character? Which is that useful thing to continuously ask myself. And probably even to anybody who's not a Stoic, it's a good thing to ask themselves. And the answer that I came back with was, well, if I don't care about my health, that doesn't say anything very kind about my character, I don't think. And then the question is, would the Stoic sage care about their health? And the answer I came back with was yes, they probably would. And even though they would recognize that you don't have to have a six pack and be able to do, like whatever those special pull-ups are where you get over the bar, or you don't have to do 1,000,000 burpees or whatever, they would probably say that someone to care nothing about their fitness or their overall health, that was not a very virtuous position. It didn't speak of a good character. And so having realized that some months ago at this point, like a year ago at this point, I have been making a concerted effort to eat better, eat more responsibly, try to be more physically active. That's hard in the role of a philosopher, right? We do a lot of sitting, we do a lot of reading, and we do a lot of writing and podcasting. So it's a constant struggle. Men in my family we're Scottish, and my dad and my grandfather used to say that men in our family are built like barrels. We're the same width at our ass as we are at our chest, right? That's how we are. And some of it is fighting those genetics, but another part of it is defining what healthy is. And for me, it's, a certain amount of flexibility, physical flexibility, a certain amount of range of motion, like a certain, you go on walks, you eat good food. It's not a weight. It's not a look. It's not a certain amount of muscle. It's a state of health. And that is pretty much determined by my doctor. I let the experts take it on in that case.
Is there in eating responsibly, so that talks about where the food is sourced, but then with that, are you primarily you're trying to stick with, primarily vegetables, less meat, the whole carb thing? Are you trying to mess with that?
So I do. Meat is kind of, at this point, meat has become something that might be a meal or 3 a month and otherwise used to flavor dishes. It's usually no longer the star of the dish.
Got it.
So a much lighter approach to using it in my cooking. And a lot of the rest of what I do is, eggs, vegetarian patties, vegan patties. Some of the danger of that, of course, is that's carb heavy stuff, right? Yeah. So you have to keep your physicality up a bit. And that's why I started the kettlebell training and such, because after 3 months of doing straight vegetarian, as someone who didn't really know how to eat vegetarian and isn't a great cook, that caused some,
I've known some people. I went vegan and I've lived on mac and cheese now.
And I gained 10 pounds, right? So that didn't work.
Yeah, totally. So you said kettlebell. Anything else you're doing from an exercise standpoint, a movement standpoint?
Yep, I try to do yoga with I keep mentioning Kai Whiting. He's a mentor of mine, a co-author of the book a couple of books we're working on. And he also co-hosts my show from time to time, usually on actually Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And so I do yoga with him via video conference because he lives in Newcastle and I'm here in the States. So I'll do yoga daily or every other daily. It depends on what both of our schedules look like. I try to take at least one good 1 mile, 2 mile long walk with the dog a couple times a week. I'm not terrific at that because you get stuck at the computer as a podcaster, a writer and such. And then I'm doing the kettlebell training. So I feel like that is a effort towards my health that is reflective of someone with a decent character.
Well, so let's follow the same thread into mental health, which you mentioned as well. So mental health, I really like to look at even the mental state that you want to find yourself in, which goes back to our first discussion on Stoicism being, or the question of that being or you even brought up Christianity, a mindset, but the mindset that we do want to be in, it feels very much a focal point of Stoicism. So asking what you value feels like that's what we've been talking about is the value, but I'll still ask you to say that from a mental health standpoint, that you're upholding your own mental health values in what way?
I think primarily knowing when to stop during the day and trying to get enough sleep. Those are the things that seem to be most important to me. Now, I also suffer from ADHD. So I shouldn't say suffer from. I guess it's just a thing that I have to deal with. And so I take a natural supplement for that, and I take care of my mental health that way in that kind of way. But then also sleeping, I try to get 9 hours a day of sleep, which can be difficult. I try to get at least a minimum of 7 because I can really feel the difference between 9 hours and 6 hours. I guess I'm getting to that age where that is more apparent now. I used to be able to drink all day and wake up on time the next day, and I can't do that anymore. And another part of it is, like I said, knowing when to quit and knowing when to stop working. So I have begun to take on this habit of going to bed at 9, waking up 9 hours later, and then working until 10 and saying, if the high level deliverables aren't done by 10 a.m., too bad, they're getting done tomorrow. Like that's just, I had to make that cut off of my day, or else I'm the kind of person who's prone to work the entire day. I will sit at my computer from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then later, right, I'll have dinner and then I'll come back and I'll sit back down and do more work, which is probably part of why I've been successful in different aspects of my life in the past, but also not sustainable in the long term. And I've begun to realize that over the last couple of years. And then knowing that I need to make time for those walks and that workout and those kinds of things.
Yeah, it's ADHD. Maybe that's a podcasting thing because, that's my, I have that one too, to work with. And, I appreciated you talked about, it was actually a different job you had in tech, but that you had found something that seemed to meet that somewhat. You got to be involved in a lot of things. And I appreciate that if we're going to have a decent podcast, there's so many moving parts. It seems like there's more every day. So
can we talk about the worst part of it?
Tell me.
Just so anybody with ADHD listening can be like, oh, so this isn't just me. We tend to be kind of smart, right? We tend to be smart enough that we can procrastinate right to the last second and then get everything done. And then we're like, I don't need to not procrastinate. Look how good I am at getting everything done at the last second because I'm so smart. This is vicious negative loop. And I've spent years breaking it.
I know that's my life. Absolutely. Literally, I've got she's a relatively new assistant, but we keep giving her more and more responsibilities. And the one right now is she's literally to take, like the ad deadlines and the show deadlines. And I said, Cindy, I don't want to know. Don't let me know when they are. You tell me when they are and make sure that they're at least a week out, a week ahead of time. Otherwise we just keep running into trouble because I'm deadline driven. Totally. I appreciate your sleep. I should have asked that in the health and wellness aspect of that. I was a pro athlete, so sleep was key then. And I've just kept that, man. If I get less than 8 hours, which we can look at that too on quality of, obviously I can get 9 hours of really crappy sleep, but assuming that it's decent quality, I'm with you. 8 to 9 is my happy place. If I look at my wearable device and it says I'm averaging 8:20, 8:30, 8.5, I'm doing well.
And I think runners and cyclists are really particular about this. And they've got it so well figured out. I used to work with a guy who's a cyclist down in, I want to say New South Wales. And the amount of science that went into his sleep was incredible. It was really wild to hear him talk about it on his podcast, but I guess we're digressing a bit.
Well, no, I want to stay here because I was going to come back to podcasting because when we look at sleep and health and wellness and our mental state, I am aware, and I would imagine you'll resonate with this too. We sit down at the computer to create. You're creating a show, you're creating content, and to do that, if I am lacking in my mental capacity, physical capacity, I'm lacking sleep. As you talked about, drank too much, ate crap, whatever. Dude, that's the first thing to go. My creative thinking. And I end up just having to ditch it and realize I just can't. So I'll just go to email. This is just going to be a busy work day because I don't have the mental capacity. I have to protect that now.
100%. And I don't just do the Practical Stoicism podcast daily. I also do the Sleep Stories podcast daily. So in addition to the books we're writing, the 2 podcasts we're producing, the Discord we're hosting, I mean, it's easy to one misstep in managing your sleep or your diet or your mental health or whatever. And it's a disaster. It could be a real disaster.
Well, and I know you're diving into the book with a big publisher, and that's been eye-opening for me, the amount of steps. I didn't know that when we look at self-publishing or going with a big publisher now on, when I'm telling people to look at the pros and cons, if you go with a big publisher, man, the amount of details that you're going to have to fulfill is 10 times, if not more. Well, we're speaking on these terms. Next category: work, career, business, your vocation. And it's just good timing for you. And it is for most of the people I have on the show. They're in the midst of things that are going well, a podcast, a book, speaking, whatever it may be. So you got a lot of things to pick from. And you just said that one of your, actually you said knowing when to stop. I would imagine knowing what to say no to is primary as well. So there's my preface. But you tell me, values, when you look at your work right now, what bubbles to the surface?
Well, as far as struggles bubble to the surface, I am by my nature designed, I think, to always say yes. I think that the idea of not being there for somebody is just so difficult for me to deal with. And it's been an ongoing effort. I'm still making it to know when to say, hey, I really can't respond. I still respond to every email I get. To give you an idea of, we have 300,000 listeners to the show. And if I get 10 emails a day, I'm responding to 10 emails a day. And I have begun recently, because we brought on a personal assistant, to kind of hand that over to the personal assistant. But it hurts so bad to do that. But if I don't do it, then I can't do the other more important things. So I think that in relationship to that sort of thing, the thing that's helped me to get through that difficulty is learning that I need to prioritize the things which are that have the most benefit to the most people. And if that means that a couple of individuals have to get not pushed off in a I don't care kind of way, but if they have to take a lower priority and be dealt with by somebody else, for example, or be dealt with just in 2 weeks instead of right now today, then that is actually better for more people. And so that's the thing I should be trying to do. And that is, I will admit easily that is a struggle. That's a huge struggle for me.
Well, I was going to ask about that because you talked about your Discord community, 600 people. One of my past endeavors was a big online community, and it in and of itself was very successful. It was great all around. And I burnt myself out by trying to be, I got chastised for it, and I still didn't back off. That I was Johnny on the spot, man. You got a question, and because I felt responsible, and I didn't want to delegate that off, and I burnt myself out, which wasn't good for anyone. So I feel you.
100%, man. And then you get that 1-star review where somebody confirms all your fears of how terrible you are, and you're like, no,
yes,
I knew I should have answered those emails. Yeah, yep. Absolutely.
Nailed you. All right, next one is money. Finances, wealth, and I'll even put in possessions these days. I do that. I actually added that into my book as part of that in this category of talk. So when you look at that aspect, values? Tell me your values there.
Well, I don't have a lot of things. I don't know, and I think that part of that is probably that I'm just not minded that way. I have a nature of, my partner gets mad at me all the time because this is something I'll do frequently. I'll be like, oh, winter's over. I don't need any of these clothes anymore. I should just donate them and just buy new clothes. And she's like, no, you don't have any clothes. You barely have any clothes. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't like these clothes anymore. And somebody else could use them. So I don't think most people I think I'm abnormal. So I think there's a disposition I have that finds me having, I've got a computer. I've got a lot of books. Seems to be my weakness is books. I like to collect old out of print books. But as far as toys, fancy things, I don't have those things. But I don't think it's because I've tried not to have them. I think it's just because that is my default. Some people's default is to hoard things. So, I'm saying that to not make myself seem like I'm a saint just because I don't have a lot of things. But physical possessions are not really my thing. As far as money, I'm actually a pretty hardcore capitalist. I'm a huge fan of business and entrepreneurship. But what I did before this was I was a consultant within the larger media world. Before that, I owned a recording studio. Before that, I owned a managed services provider, which is basically a tech company. And I'm a huge fan of making money, and I love money, and I view money as an indifferent, right? It's a thing that has no impact on my virtue, but if I pursue it and I have it and I am working towards a virtuous character, then there are some things I can do for the Cosmopolis, various nonprofits, for people in my family, for people I don't even know. For example, my partner also got a little frustrated with me the other day because I got stopped on the way to dinner by someone from the Nature Conservancy. And she had her little iPad and she was trying to get people to sign up for, I think it was like $30 a month or something to support nature initiatives. And one thing she said during her pitch that really caught my ear was that I think that by 2025, they would have conserved enough area across the world that were identified as nature areas that you couldn't, build on or whatever, that we would be, I think the word she used was net nature positive or something, so that we were actually adding more green space to the planet than we were taking away from it. Yeah. And I thought, man, that's something that I would like to be involved in. And because I am someone who not necessarily values the accruing of wealth, but who is comfortable with pursuing the accruing of wealth, and so I have some money to be disposable with, I thought, yes. And so now I support that initiative, probably at more than I should, but but that's okay. And that's great. So I look at money as a preferred indifferent, because I would prefer to have it because I can do things with it that I think are useful. And so I value money. I said earlier that I love money. That's probably not the greatest terminology, but I'm a fan of it because I feel like I can use it to do helpful things.
That's what I heard, that you love what money enables you to do, and in understanding your context now, if that aligns with virtue, then I would put that as a net positive.
Right. And, the opposite could be true. If I was addicted to gambling or something and I had a bunch of money, then that would be what we would call in Stoicism a dispreferred indifferent. We would not want Tanner to have money if he was a gambling addict.
Yeah, fair. Category here is your personal interest. And the way that I frame this is interest that may not be in and of themselves productive. So these are the things that you do that just give you joy, that inspire you, that you may do to give yourself energy, even though the thing by itself may not look like it is, you're not creating something new, and it's not, again, productive is my favorite word to use to play with, to start with.
I don't know that I have a lot of these. Once a month. Okay, so here's an example. I have a Nintendo Switch. I'm probably the only man alive with a Nintendo. I don't know if that's true, but every now and then a game franchise will come out with a new version of itself. It's called Zelda or Mario. If either one of those games come out as a brand new release, then I'll buy it and I'll play it, and then I'll beat it, and then I'll never play it again. So that is not necessarily productive, but it's something that I do for very rare touch and go fun, because like I said, it's only when a new game comes out. Right now it's covered in probably an inch of dust because no new games have come out recently. So I'll play games, but not very frequently at all. And I do get a lot of reward in writing and thinking through things. For example, when we launched our Substack like 10 days ago, I think I've already written like 8 articles because I get there's a certain amount of fulfillment I get from working through ideas.
Yeah.
I get criticized for this sometimes because some of the writing I do, I view writing as a way of exploring how correct or incorrect I am about something. So I like to write out in the open and have it ripped apart if something's wrong, because that actually helps me in the long term. And I kind of enjoy that back and forth of learning. So the writing is definitely part of it. And what else would I say? I really like to go out to eat dinner. Maybe that sounds really weird.
No, it's perfect.
There's a little Italian restaurant right next to us. It's like 2 blocks up and 1 block over. It's called Shells and Sauce. And it's just a little neighborhood Italian restaurant. And the bartender there, his name's Jose, and he's great. And I've made friends with him, and I like the people there, and I like to just sit there and have a beer and eat my dinner. And that fills me in some way, physically and mentally. And then travel. I really like to travel, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be really opulent travel like Portugal we were talking about earlier, or anywhere that people would think of as like as a vacation. For example, when I went to Podcast Movement, which is when I first met our shared network, Glassbox, I drove. I didn't have to drive. I live in Denver. There's an airport that goes right to where the event was in Texas, but I wanted to drive because I like being out on the road by myself for some reason. That makes me feel good. I like being alone a lot too, which is contradictory a bit to liking to go out to eat and talk to the bartender and the people who go there in the neighborhood. I also really like to be alone. Maybe more than I should be. But there's something about being able to just talk to myself and have a night, that crazy drive from New Mexico to Amarillo, Texas is like nothing for hours and hours. And I love that drive, even though I do sometimes worry that my car is going to break down halfway through and I'm going to have a long walk ahead of me.
Fair. But I wonder, I mean, I as well recharge. That's alone is when I recharge, appreciate the social aspects, but I recharge it. But I wonder again to the creative side, it feels like it just takes more space for me to really get down the rabbit hole. It takes some space, and that doesn't come by easily.
No, especially when you're creating a podcast every day and man, all the things that we do as podcasters, it can be hard to find alone time. So I really value it. I think it's important to my mental health.
I got a kind of a wrap up, interesting thought question here. Cause when we look at these are basically these are 7 categories. They are spiritual, relationships, health and wellness, mind, mental health, work and career, money, finances. And then I put that on, personal interests, 7 areas. And I'm thinking about it within the Stoic context of, I haven't thought about it this way, but I guess I think about them as roles. These are roles of life. These are categories of life that I have roles within. And how do I view those? I haven't thought about it that way. Does that resonate at all? How do I view those, and what is my virtue in each of those categories? I could go through and think about that differently, actually.
I think that you're onto something. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily Stoic in the most formal sense.
Okay.
But I think that we do have a personal role to our physical health and our mental health, because if we are in poor health, if we are in poor mental health or physical health, it might be true that as a result, we cannot, for example, we talked much earlier about waking up on time for our job, right? And if we don't get great sleep, we're not eating well, we're not going to bed on time, or we're overindulging or whatever it is we might be doing or not be doing, then that has a direct result on our roles. And I think definitely that unplugging and recharging is the other side of that, right? I have a duty to do XYZ for others, for the community, for my immediate family and such circles are concerned again. But I also have a responsibility to myself, right, who's right at the center of that circle, for the same reason that you put on an oxygen supply mask on yourself before you put it on somebody else in an airplane. So I definitely think that I have to do some research to know if the ancient Stoics would have agreed with that. But I think there's something there. And I think that somebody who has a virtuous character or is approaching a virtuous character definitely considers their own mental health and physical health to the extent that it affects their other responsibilities. I think you've got something there.
Huh. Interesting, man. Thank you. Well, appreciate you just sharing candidly, and it gives more context, obviously, on you, but also the Stoic way, if we can give it a term, of that. Man, thank you. Thanks for being with me. Thanks for the time, and it's been a gift, Tanner. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for joining us in the discussion. That again is Tanner Campbell. You can find him anywhere you type that name in, and his podcast again, Practical Stoicism. And the book is titled, What is Stoicism? A Brief and Accessible Overview. And it is. It's just a brief book that I appreciate its brevity. Well, till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning of our lives and experience the miracle of living.
Yeah.